Now I'm ready. I'm standing in the right place. I've got my mic ready. So a very warm welcome to everybody for our Resilience Hub event, the Health Climate Nexus, and delivering get the title right, delivering a virtuous cycle of benefits. So the reason that we've chosen this topic is we can see more and more how the impact of climate change has subsequent health impacts. And in fact, I'm not sure that there are many climate change impacts that don't bring an element of health. And what is becoming very evident in the conversation is that the healthier society is, the more it's capable of being resilient to the impacts of climate change. And then also, we can see how many synergies there are between responding to the climate crisis in terms of improving resilience to climate change and similarly improving resilience to health. So that's the reason for our topic. So on the next slide, a very small bit of housekeeping because we'll be taking photographs today. So we just wanted to say if anyone doesn't want their photograph taken, please come and let me know at the end and we'll sort that out. So first, I wanted to give you an overview of the programme, which is on the next slide. So it's fairly ambitious programme. We had this is the substance of the communication today is all about solutions, and we wanted to bring not the why we should be doing things, but the how, and showcasing where people are already delivering solutions. And we had so many of those solutions to choose from that we split our program into two. So first, we have some policy-driven solutions, and we're also going to make both the physical audience and the virtual audience do some work. We have a poll, and we're going to show you the QR code for that in a minute, a Menti poll. So then we'll have a discussion about that, and then we'll move on to another set of speakers on more topic-driven solutions. And then there's a bit of a wrap-up discussion about what we found. So in terms of outlining why Mott MacDonald is bringing this to you, I wanted to describe what we do. So on the next slide, you'll see our group purpose unfold before you. But for those who don't know us, what we do is we design the services and systems that keep society running. So the schools, the hospitals, the roads, the railways, the energy, waste, water systems, digital systems, and also provide some of the insight on environmental, social, and economic outcomes that help municipalities and our clients make decisions on these topics. So as you can see, we're very much into the interconnected nature of these systems and how they improve societal outcomes. So hence, I'm really proud to work for a company who, albeit has an engineering backbone, but is all about improving outcomes for the people who use these systems. Thinking about this nature of interconnectedness, I've put on the next slide a quote that I feel is really powerful. So I'll read it out. If the pandemic has a lesson, it is this: everything is connected. There's no economy without health, no health without science, no science without government, no government without trust, no trust without facts, and no facts without a public commitment to the pursuit of the common good. And I would say also, there's not really that basis of common good without a healthy society. So just showing us how all of the things that we're thinking about whilst we're looking at climate change have all that interconnected nature. So the next slide then shows the QR code for the poll, and I think for those online as well, that will be in the chat. So take a moment to go in there, and please only answer the first three questions. and we'll come back and have a look at what we learned there. But I really want to get on to showcasing our speakers today. So we have a lineup slide that will just show you. We have two physically speaking and two that are, three that are online. So in a moment, I'll introduce Wisborne and Alice. Then we have Fiona, who is on the other side of the world, and it is the middle of the night, so we thank Fiona massively. Then we have Sophie Howe, and finally, Irvan Perungrum. So first off, I will introduce Wisborne and Alice. Kicking off here, it's about illustrating the strong link between climate change, health and livelihoods. So this is a great example of how action between central and local actors can improve resilience to the impacts of climate change in Zimbabwe. So Wisborne Malaya is the Secretary General of the Zimbabwe Chamber of Informal Economy Associations. So that's ZCIEA, which is a membership-driven organisation representing Zimbabwe's informal workers, who comprise about 80% of the company's workforce. Wisborne is committed to promoting decent livelihoods while also supporting the health and dignity of all workers in Zimbabwe. And the programme that Wisborne is going to be talking about has been supported by the Institute for Environment and Development, the IIED. So we also have Alice Sverdlik on the line. So hopefully there'll be a chance to bring Alice into the conversation when we get to the questions. And we will make sure that we flash up Alice at some point so you can see that she's out there in the ether. So Alice is a researcher at the International Institute for Environment and Development. She has interests in health, city planning and informality. She's partnered with ZCIEA to analyse the climate and health related risks facing informal workers in Zimbabwe. So enough from me, because you really want to hear from the speakers. So over to Wisborne.
Thank you very much. Shall I say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all, as my name has been introduced already. Quickly, I'm going to tap into the work which we have done with the support from the International Institute for Environment Development, IIED, and we partnered the Training and Research Support Center in Zimbabwe, as well as Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions and our organization, Zimbabwe Chamber of Informal Economy Association. Basically, this research was targeting at analyzing and understanding the operations which are within the informal settlements, the informal economy, and how they, as well as the effects on climate as they operate. And within the research we did, we targeted two key areas of the country, two key provinces, Harare province and Masvingo province, where in Harare we targeted two areas, one which is like a swamp area, which was identified after the effects of Operation Muramba-China in 2005. And this place is called Caledonia, and we also had Mavuku Tafara as well as Hopley. Then in Masvingo, we targeted the area called Mucheke and Rujeko. What we identified in these areas is both areas, the people who are operating in the informal economy, they are trying to earn a living through various activities of even the waste, which is put in the communities. They take the waste and they recycle. But at the same time, they were facing challenges which were supposed to be attended to by their local authorities. One key issue is water. There is a challenge of water, and people were resolving to other ways of fetching for water, which resulted in them fetching water from unprotected wells. I can give an example of one of the areas in Harare, Hopley Farm, where some were even ending up fetching water in a well which is in a gravesite. This is how bad the situation was. But we also identified that in the same space, it was a very organized system of operation where some people would throw away their products or materials as garbage, and other ones who collected them for recycling. We have seen a situation where people have managed to put up some, to mend some bags out of plastics which was thrown by others, and they recycled some. They pick up can, some they also pick up some plastic electronic gadgets, and they separate the copper and so forth, and they go and resell to earn a living. We also identified, for example, in Masvingo, that there was a high level for harassment of informal workers by the authorities because they deemed all the operations which were happening there, like, for example, them doing agriculture within the roadsides and in the urban communities. And according to the bylaws there, it's not allowed, and those people would be criminalized. At the end of this research, the key stakeholders, in particular in Masvingo, where the community highlighted the challenges they were facing. One of them, key, that the local authorities were not providing proper service delivery of collecting garbage and providing them clean water, as well as not also providing them with the electricity, which is energy. Then the community also gave proposals to the local authority, which the local authority came on board and accepted as many of the proposals. One of them being that the local authority will combine efforts with the community and start to plant trees annually, which is part of resuscitating the environment. The local authority also committed that they will improve the issue of them collecting garbage in the community and set up what we called the champions team, where local authority members, the community members, and other key stakeholders are part of that champions committee, and they would meet regularly to assess where everyone is playing their role to make sure their environment is safe and better. The other important key point I may need to highlight is, as a result of the research, we also managed to sign a memorandum of understanding with the city of Masvingo, where we came up with some recommendations to be addressed. And these recommendations, they are more for the benefit of the community members as well as the local authorities to put harmony in that area. As I speak, we have already started the engagement on the recommendations, where there's an agreement to make sure the local authority will provide the space for people to start to operate in a habitable way, promoting the green economy as far as in a way to try and preserve the environment. In Harare, but the community members have already committed to make sure they will comply to regular operations as required by the authorities, as long as they are provided with water and the garbage is collected on time for them to make sure they are safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wisborne. And one of the things that Wisborne told me was the trust between the local actors from the workers and the municipalities, which was really important in this work. So moving on quickly. So now, from the other side of the world, a nation that's already recognised the link between climate change and health and sees the opportunity to create guidelines for action, I'd like to introduce Fiona Armstrong, who is founder and executive director of the Climate and Health Alliance, whose mission is to build powerful health sector movement for climate action. And one of the things what we did to create a good environment here was I asked people fun facts to say about themselves. So we didn't manage to get any for Wisborne and Alice, but Fiona tells me that she once asked the Prince of Wales to pass on a message to the then Prime Minister of Australia, Tony Abbott, to step up Australia's commitment to climate action. So over to Fiona, thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. Well, you never want to miss an opportunity like that to ask a favour of the Prince of Wales. Welcome, everybody, and thanks so much for the opportunity to join this event tonight. I want to, or tonight as it is here, your afternoon, I think, in Glasgow. As I begin, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which I'm speaking tonight, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and acknowledge that sovereignty of this land was never ceded, and pay my respects to traditional owners and Indigenous people across the world, and acknowledge ongoing injustices with respect to stolen land. So I've been asked to talk briefly about climate adaptation and resilience in Australia. Many of you would know that the level of warming that we are already experiencing and will experience in coming decades requires adaptation, particularly for those who are experiencing climate change impacts worst and first. People who are elderly, people who are living in the tropics, Australia's first people who are living on country, particularly in Northern Australia, people with comorbidities. So in the health field, we're referring to people who've got multiple different conditions that exacerbate their experience of conditions like heat waves, people with conditions like multiple sclerosis, people who take many different medications, all vulnerable. So to the response, my organisation, the Climate and Health Alliance, was involved in developing the Human Health and Wellbeing Climate Adaptation Plan for the state of Queensland in 2018. And I want to commend the Queensland government for their leadership. This was the first climate adaptation plan focused on health, developed for an Australian jurisdiction. And as we travelled around, we worked with colleagues from the National Centre for Climate Change Adaptation Research Facility. And as we travelled around the state, asking health and social sector stakeholders what they wanted in an adaptation plan, we heard that they were faced with multiple climate change adaptation strategies, but lacked policy guidance as well as the capacity and the resources that they needed to respond. What we did hear was that was a very strong appetite to build climate resilience in the health sector to ensure service quality and continuity. So recognising that a failure to adapt would risk the safety and quality of care. And there was really a clear emphasis on the need for stakeholder engagement. People wanted to be involved in developing solutions, and they wanted to be involved in collaborative networks to guide and support action. We heard about some of the challenges. There were risks to supply chains, about people being displaced from homes and from country, and there was a lack of leadership and financing and governance. And associated challenges of rising energy and insurance costs. We also heard about a lack of information to guide decision making, and that this was leading to a sense of helplessness in the community, in the sector, and in the workforce, compounded by a siloed approach to policy and practice that was limiting the effectiveness of actions. So what stakeholders wanted in the plan, and you might get a sense of where I'm heading, collaboration was a really strong key. People wanted the opportunity to work in a sort of systems approach and to work with people from different sectors and from different disciplines to bring a systemic approach to tackling these challenges. There was really strong interest in supporting the sector and reducing the sector's own contributions to climate change through its carbon emissions and environmental footprint. Some of you may not be aware that the healthcare sector globally is responsible for about 4% of global emissions. In Australia, due to our carbon intensive energy sector, it's around 7%. However, there was a very strong awareness about the opportunities for significant economic, social, health, and environmental benefits associated with climate mitigation and adaptation. what people think about and as no regrets and win-win options. So the pathways to respond involved making decisions, and stakeholders want leadership. They want health impact assessments, they want support to do risk assessments, and they want funding and resources to build resilience and adaptive capacity. But as I said, they really also want opportunities to collaborate and recognise that engagement and connections builds both emotional and social resilience, but it also supports the emergence of locally relevant responses and empowerment. Data and research is very important to underpin adaptation and resilience. And we also heard about the importance of building on the strengths of vulnerable groups. So there was, people were at pains to emphasize that those affected worst and first doesn't necessarily, aren't by definition weak or without capacity, but it was very clear that people who are vulnerable want their strengths, the strengths that they do possess, to be acknowledged and built upon rather than being cast as victims, because that's very disempowering. So the plan that we developed was built around 10 priority adaptation measures, focused on leadership and governance, building the preparedness of the sector to respond, evaluating those specific vulnerabilities, but building on strengths. Underpinning this all with research and data and evaluation, economics and financing is absolutely critical, setting up structures for collaboration, and using education and communication to build skills and capacity, but recognising the underpinning importance of policy and regulation, that the services, the sector and industries want this certainty to guide decisions and investment. And investing in climate resilient infrastructure, technology and service design were all critical. So I would finish by saying that we were very clear in developing this plan that mutually reinforcing adaptation and mitigation strategies are critical, because no amount of adaptation will protect health if we fail to mitigate. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sophie. So again, moving on to the UK, specifically Wales, where that policy is already in place and is already making changes. So I will invite Sophie Howe to speak. You're going to wonder what the fun fact I'm going to say about you is. But just quick introduction. So Sophie is the Future Generations Commissioner for Wales. Her role is to provide advice to the government and other public bodies in Wales on delivering social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being for current and, most importantly, future generations. Fun fact about Sophie, I like this one, is she is described by The Guardian as the world's first minister of the unborn.
Quite a cool description. Not entirely accurate, because I'm actually an independent commissioner, so I'm not part of government. I'm not a minister. My job is to hold the government and the other 43 institutions, public sector institutions, delivering policy and services in Wales to account on how they meet the needs of future generations. So Wales is a small and progressive country, the only country in the world to have legislated to protect the interests of future generations through our Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. I'm not sure here we are. This is exactly the sort of overarching principle contained within the Act, and the duty that falls on our 44 public bodies, including the Welsh Government and specifically Welsh ministers, to demonstrate that they're acting in a manner which seeks to ensure that the needs of the present are met without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Why is this a solution that I'm proposing? Well, if every government in every part of the world did this, we wouldn't all be here today talking about a climate catastrophe, because as far back as the early 1990s, when the UN published its first framework of evidence on climate change, we knew then, probably not in as much detail as we know now, but we knew then of the problems. since Al Gore published his first Inconvenient Truth at around about the same time. We've done more damage to the planet knowingly since that point. And we've done it because we have discounted the needs and interests of future generations. So what does our Act do, other than requiring this sort of decision-making in this context? If I could have the next slide, please. It also sets out 7 long-term wellbeing goals. And these goals were devised with the people of Wales in a conversation about the Wales, what's the Wales you want to leave behind to your children and your grandchildren. At the same time as our Act was being developed, the UN SDGs were going through, so looking to the SDGs and looking to the conversations in Wales. These were the goals that made it into our legislation. Again, critically important, this isn't some high-level policy documentation. This is, that can change from one political cycle or one party manifesto to the next. This is set out in law in Wales. And all 44 of our public of those wellbeing goals, a really important point in itself, particularly around the interconnections. So it's just as much the responsibility of our NHS in Wales to deliver a resilient Wales, a Wales of vibrant culture and thriving Welsh language, a prosperous Wales, a more equal Wales, as it is to deliver on the health of the nation. Why is that so critically important? Well, because we know that the things that make the biggest difference to life expectancy and health are things that are completely, in the main, outside of the healthcare system. So the World Health Organization tells us that in terms of the gaps in life expectancy, and we know that from the global north compared to the global south. We also know that back in the UK and in my hometown, there's a 10-year difference in life expectancy from people who live in the leafier suburbs in the north to the poorer suburbs in the south. And the things that account for that life expectancy, 35% about income protection and social security, 29% about your living conditions, the quality of your homes, do you have access to nature, are you living in areas of high air pollution, 19%, again, which is why this is important, that what we're talking about here is the well-being of future generations, not the needs of future generations. Social relationships, community, sense of agency, the softer stuff that has perhaps been forgotten for too long by our political leaders and by our structures of governance. But that sense of, can you make a difference in your community? Do you have trusted relationships and people you can turn to in your hour of need? 19% of the difference to the gaps in life expectancy. And so what are we seeing as a result of these requirements? I just want to give a mention as well, if I could have the next slide, the principles by which our decisions have to be taken. The minister who took this piece of legislation through the Senedd, the Welsh Parliament, described it as the Common Sense Act. Why do we need to legislate for common sense? Sadly, it's because common sense isn't actually that common. And so here we have 5 ways of working. 5 ways in which decisions must be taken in Wales. So they must be taken considering the long-term impact of those decisions. They must be taken in a way which seeks to prevent problems from occurring or getting worse. They must be taken in a way which is integrated, so this is recognising those connections between all of those 7 wellbeing goals. Our organisations must collaborate with each other and with citizens, with business, with the voluntary sector and so on, and they must involve citizens. Now, I think if you ask the average person, they would say that's an entirely sensible set of principles for decision-making, but very rarely do we actually apply these principles. So what has changed as a result of this? One of the biggest, earliest test cases for the legislation was government plans to spend the entire of Wales's borrowing capacity on a 13-mile stretch of motorway where there was a problem with congestion. My intervention as the independent commissioner holding the government to account on those proposals was, can you explain to me how doing that is in line with our goal of a prosperous Wales, which talks about a productive, innovative, low-carbon society, one which uses resources efficiently and proportionately, one which acts on climate change. No, they struggled to do that. Can you explain to me how this is in line with our goal of a healthier Wales when we have an obesity crisis as one of our key long-term trends? What we actually need to do is to get people out, off their backsides, out of their cars, walking, cycling, using public transport, and we need to reduce air pollution levels. Can you explain to me how this is in line with the goal of a more equal Wales when 25% of the lowest income families in that region don't even own a car, so you're spending all of that money not for their benefit but for the benefit of those who are arguably already better off? The road programme was cancelled. Instead, applying our Future Generations Act, we are now spending 800 million. We'll have 6 new train stations, mass investment in active travel, bus routes, public transport, and so on. And it goes further than that. As a result of our legislation, different conversations are starting to emerge. In our capital city, the public health consultant was seconded to the council to lead on the development of the transportation strategy. And when you apply a public health lens to a transport problem, you get a completely different set of solutions. So what the public health consultant did is said, actually, I'm going to target first the areas in Cardiff with the lowest levels of life expectancy and the highest levels of air pollution. Also an equality issue there, socioeconomic, but if you're black, Asian minority ethnic living in the UK, you're more likely to be living in areas of high air pollution, less likely to have access to nature and public open space. So let's target those communities who are living with that air pollution. Let's put in our active travel routes in those communities first so that we can reduce levels of air pollution. Whilst we're doing that, let's clean and green those communities. Let's work with the drainage people and build in sustainable urban drainage so that those communities become green. The concrete jungle that they formerly were in is no longer flooding, and we have increased active travel rates in Cardiff. New data just came out this week, 78% increase in kids travelling to school sustainably since some of these actions have been put in place. I could give you many more details, such as the doctors who are planting trees, such as the doctors who can prescribe bike hire free of charge instead of statins, such as the hospitals who are creating sites for nature on their estate. This is the sort of decision-making that happens when you have a governance infrastructure which is long-term, which is integrated, and which is designed to meet the needs of future generations. Thank you.
Brilliant. That's so compelling. And somebody said something yesterday that really stayed with me. She said, all other species know that their primary purpose is to protect the future of their offspring and their species. So just, we're beginning to see the picture here in terms of building up the synergies between health and climate resilience. So but I'm sure it looks so different in different parts of the world. So, Irvin, over to you, but your quick introduction, including fun fact. You are a sustainability researcher and the Jakarta Governor Special Envoy on Climate Change. And one of your major contributions in the field of environmental law development in Indonesia is the Adaptation of Environmental Protection and Management Act. And I learned just earlier on that Irvin is a skateboarder. So as a form of active travel, I totally applaud that. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you very much to having me here because I can meet with Sophie. She's the commissioner for Future Generation Act. I take my degree at Cardiff, and one of my coursework is about Future Generation Act. Thank you very much. So, speaking about Jakarta, we are a mega city in Southeast Asia. Like you said, we have problems that we encounter in Global South in terms of air pollution. As you know, air pollution and climate change impact is really, really devastating in our region. And then Jakarta, we have 10 million people, inhabitants, and recent research from the University of Technology of Bandung said 1.6 million people in Jakarta impacted by air pollution impact and climate change. That's why in the city of Jakarta we are developing our resilience strategy, facilitating by Rockefeller Foundation, where we really do an analysis of urban system. So we analyze 10 urban systems that being threatened by climate change. One of that is healthcare and well-being of others, where we are not just facing air pollution, heat wave, heat strokes, but also as a city in tropic island, we also have malaria, dengue at rainy season. So what we do on that is we take this resilience strategy approach by develop it by like including three vulnerable actors: women, children, and the elderly, so we can get the insight and get the input from them how we can increase and developing our health system, not just to give not just to increase coverage of healthcare for lower income neighborhood, but also to give them not just money to use after they get the impact, but how we can give them the access to better lifestyle like parks, better air pollution system for monitoring and for cleaning the pollution in Jakarta. So my highlights on this is we need to work with the most vulnerable actors, but also we need to develop the policy based on the needs of the vulnerable actors. But also one of the problem that we are facing in Indonesia is we are not really have the collaboration from the business sector at the planning stage. So mostly it's about giving corporate social responsibility. So in our resilience strategy, we are inviting them to involve at the first hand on the planning stage to help our city to be more resilient and increasing our urban adaptive capacity. Thank you, Claire.
Excellent, thank you. So, yes. And I will make sure we give a round of applause to the people in the virtual space as well before we move on. But next we're going to see how the crowdsourcing of thoughts came through on the Mentimeter poll to see what sort of questions that might generate for our speakers. So over to Anna, who I think we will soon see on screen. And in order to be able to see the results, you'll probably have to, yes, by all means, take those seats to see. So we asked 3 questions, and I'll probably, So, yeah. So there is a policy gap in your city, state, region in relation to addressing the health impacts of climate change. And I wanted to, well, let's go on actually to the other 2 to see what we've got from those other questions. So another one, does your city, state, region have plans to embed long-term societal resilience to the impacts of health and climate change? So that's good news that not quite half, but we know that there is some movement in that. And then the final question, which is one that's related to Sophie and the future of well-being. How mature is your city, state or region in the prioritization of the well-being of future generations? And again, that's really good news that it's moving on the agenda, because I was rather expecting that it would be shifted towards the right, but there's a good sort of moderate So yeah, a good normal distribution there, which is fairly pleasing. And hopefully if we did it again in a year or two's time, we would see a shift. More speaking from Sophie, and we'll undoubtedly get there. But just in 5 minutes, I suppose, so my first question would be in relation to that first slide from Fiona. I'm interested to know, so it's identified that it feels like there is a policy gap. What advice would you give to anyone from, I suppose, local government in relation to where to start to begin to close that policy gap?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Look, I think the good news is that local government are actually leading in lots of ways. I mean, both in terms of building resilience, but also in mitigation as well. The slide that you have in terms of how many plans exist is roughly reflective of the World Health Organization survey in terms of national climate and health plans. So those are around 50 odd countries have those plans in place. Plenty more to do. Here in Australia, in local government, there's good work going on in the state of Victoria. We're involved in a project to support local governments in Western Sydney, one of the most climate impacted metropolitan areas in Australia, to bring climate health considerations into their plans and strategies at the local government level. And I guess the good news is that there's lots of places for local government to start, whether it's around supporting active transport, like Sophie said, is so important, you know, getting people out of their cars, but also greening our streets to reduce the urban heat island effect, but also to improve air quality. It can also be around, you know, local sort of food initiatives. That's a great way to engage communities in strategies that can both reduce emissions and improve our health. Food is something that people see as incredibly tangible, and that they feel a sense of agency around, and they can appreciate the immediate benefits associated with that. So there is quite a lot going on. There's a lot of strategies, I think, that local governments are already engaged in that they're not necessarily even thinking about as health and climate change strategies, like those ones that I mentioned, but they're already, you know, taking action on, and once they start to appreciate how those can contribute to integrated solutions, hopefully that can increase their motivation to scale them up.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so on our second result, which was about whether cities, states and regions had plans to embed societal resilience. I'm interested to know what you said, Irvin, about the fact that the solutions are not so much in the treatment when somebody's got sick, but more in the preventative. And I'm just wondering, and I might ask also Alice, so if you give a quick observation and then we bring Alice in, to whether you feel like that the best place to start that movement is a sort of top-down policy, or from a bottom-up in the design of places that comes more sort of naturally.
Claire, I also want to add ideas on the first question. So there is gap. Why? Because the mitigation and adaptation context, all the ideas and money is in mitigation side. We don't have anything on adaptation. In Indonesia, for instance, we don't have any adaptation and resilience law binding products. That's why the gaps is there and the funding is not there, Claire. So in Jakarta, we are trying to integrate it in one legal binding products under the gubernatorial instruction where it's just not mention mitigation as strategy, but also adaptation and resilience to ensure we have sufficient fundings for the action. And I think that's the first in Asia, if I'm not mistaken, because no one's talk about adaptation because we cannot measure it. It's not like mitigation that we can easily measure. The second question, I think, it will need to approach. It will the government need capacity building from the inside, where academia, business sector, NGO activists need to capacitate the local government to develop the strategy, implement the action, but also we need like pressure from without, where citizens really exercise their access to health and well-being. For example, in COVID-19 in Jakarta, they're arising on bicycle user, and Brontom price is being jet plane because everyone wants to use bicycle, but there is no bicycle line. So they're insisting to the government to develop bicycle line for them. So it's like integrating the two interests become one implementation, where Jakarta now have more than 200 kilometers of bicycle line. And finally, I would like to say that COVID-19 also give pressure, not just climate change, because in Jakarta now we experiencing more of what we call it, violence to women because of work from home, and we are getting phone calls from our citizens that they are embracing that. So I think it will be, we need to work like local government by facilitating the process and really working with the citizen how we give them access to healthy and well-being. Claire, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. So very quickly, if we could have Alice to see any observations on what you've heard so far, and then we're about to do a speaker reshuffle, and I know Sophie has to go, but if there was time, just a very quick observation from you on that final slide and the normal distribution. So Alice, if we can have you on screen, just so we can give you a wave, because we know you're there.
Thanks very much. Yes, as Wisborne was saying, we have evidence of innovation in a smaller city in Zimbabwe called Masvingo, where strong civil society partnerships with a responsive local government help to bring change to support health and livelihoods, as well as food security, nurseries for tree planting, and ways of working in cross-sectoral ways. I think that's another key aspect that's come out from some of the other speakers. To achieve change on health, it really is important to work across sectors, but especially in the case of Zimbabwe, we see the example of a bottom-up partnership that is equitable and led by community needs, and I think can really achieve multiple transformative benefits that way. So that's one way that we've seen action on the ground already translating into meaningful benefits. Thanks.
Thank you. And your program with Wisborne is pretty awesome. So thank you for illustrating that. So Sophie, final comment on the future of the well-being of future generations.
So I think that the slide and the the number of people who are moderately or indeed to a high degree considering the interests of future generations is encouraging. I think I just counsel a little bit of caution in terms of how that's being done and whether that's being done in an integrated way. And it's actually quite difficult to do that unless you have a set of long-term goals that you're actually working towards and sort of backcasting from, if you like. So I think that, let me give you an example. If your sole aim is to decarbonise the transportation system, because we need to do that in order to tackle climate change and emissions from vehicles, because that's in the interest of future generations, investing all your money in electric vehicles and policies around that is probably quite a sensible thing to do. If, however, your mission is to reduce transport-related emissions whilst also reducing poverty and making sure that we're not creating a situation where we're making things more unequal for people and creating more cohesive communities and looking after people's health, then actually investing in EV is probably not the right answer, and your answer is to invest in public transport, active travel, and so on. So I think the importance here is that set of holistic long-term goals that you must test and use as your metrics to test every decision that you take in terms of, is it in the interest of future generations in that holistic way rather than that siloed way.
Perfect, thank you. That's a very good place to end, halfway through, as in we're not done yet. But I would like to thank everybody and give both the people in the room and our virtual speakers a big round of applause, please. Thank you. Okay, so a bit of a reshuffle. Irvin, there may well be more that you can contribute, so please don't go anywhere.
No, I'm not.
Good. And Jad, we can welcome you to the stage. Now we're going to take a slightly different lens on the same issue. So, which is looking at particular health or climate topics like air quality or food security, and seeing how they then can open out into a better sort of systemized approach to deliver both climate and health changes or benefits. So we will start with I'm just thinking, should we show the slide? No, I think we're fine because everyone's clocked in with the Menti poll, so I don't think we need to show that, the code again. So we'll start with a discussion on what solutions emerged when considering the climate impact in the city of Quito and the particular issues there related to things like water shortage. So I'm very pleased to introduce in a minute a virtual speaker, David Jacome-Pollitt, who is currently the Metropolitan Director of Resilience at the Municipality of Quito in Ecuador and the Chief Resilience Officer as part of the Resilient Cities Network. He is a systems thinker, I was delighted in those words, and resilience advocate with 18 years of experience in policy, planning and project management. David's fun fact relates to the fact that he has a double-barreled surname, but quite often people jump to the end name, so he has to be very aware of when his surname is used, because otherwise he can be thinking that somebody's speaking to somebody else and it's actually him that they want. So David, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Claire, and hi, everybody. The water, food, and health nexus affect Quito through different time and space scales, promising to perpetuate the vicious cycle that creates vulnerability among our population. Our water supply, food production, and economic systems are highly dependent on páramos or highland ecosystems. Water is our bloodline, as the Andes depend much on a healthy and functional Amazon rainforest to keep producing water. Although we do not foresee water stress in the near future, it is certain that in the not too distant future, competition for this resource can create energy insecurity and deepen food insecurity in Ecuador. At a local scale, everyday Quiteños and Quiteñas, the people from Quito, face difficulties with their daily routines due to a vulnerable infrastructure and an inefficient mobility system. Commutes to work or trips to access food and services can be easily disrupted. This has been aggravated by climate-related events. Flooding and landslides clog main arteries where our main transportation systems operate on the one hand, and affect informal settlements and vulnerable populations dispersed in the city on the other. As a result, climate change in the short and in the long run is creating a larger gap for people to access food in both physical as well as in economic ways. Time is scarce and the scale of problems is large. In response, and in the same way, solutions must be multi-solving. That is, addressing several problems at the same time. For example, improving housing and habitat to achieve quality and safety can be a great opportunity to reduce spatial and social gaps by improving their living conditions and also improving access to food and quality services at the same time. Currently, both the development plan and the resilience strategy of Quito lays a healthy nutrition as the cornerstone that supports socioeconomic inclusion. And in turn, this can help prevent risk scenarios creation. We are planning and we're putting a lot of efforts into eradicating poverty and ending food insecurity to help prevent chronic illnesses and non-communicable diseases, because a sick population is prone to remain poor and is more vulnerable to climate change. While at the same time, we need to work on offering better and more inclusive alternatives to create and build safer, vibrant, and healthier habitats in order to be better equipped to offer sustained quality of life for all. I will stop there and thank you for the opportunity.
Brilliant, thank you, David. And it was interesting when we were speaking to David, because we were thinking about that topic in the systems and synergy space of the motivations not being related to climate. So when you're living hand to mouth and you're facing food insecurity and things, the driver towards adopting some of the systems is about being able to feed your family more healthily. So it is really important when we're facing the need to adjust people's behaviors to find the trigger, the emotional trigger that will help them move towards the direction we want. But it's not necessarily going to be in relation to climate change, because there are more immediate issues. So now our next talk is about the interlink between the health-related topic of air quality and climate. So we have Richa Upadhyay, who is head of India Programme for the Clean Air Fund, and also works on campaigns across Clean Air Fund's geographies. Richa's overseen many successful air quality campaigns, but has background in program development and management as well. So as well as working in air quality, she's developed campaigns for many relevant fields, including human rights, labour rights, women and gender equality, and child protection. So Richa, we now know that she once crossed the Sinai Desert on the back of a camel. So Richa, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Claire. Air pollution is today's silent pandemic, killing millions everywhere. And along with this ongoing pandemic, the world is not acting fast enough to tackle climate change. So we have a dual problem in front of us. There are 4.2 million deaths due to impact of outdoor air pollution. And among the 4.2 million, we know that at least 300,000 children under 5 are losing their lives due to impact of air quality. Tackling air pollution and climate change in a joined-up manner, therefore, would accelerate progress towards both cleaning up the air and making communities healthier, but also tackling the global warming and trying to reach the limits of 1.5, which would then result in saving millions of lives. In order to understand more about what an integrated approach could look like, the Clean Air Fund, in partnership with Dalberg, recently published a report which asked 2 following questions. 1, how can we capitalize on a clean air dividend within climate action, and what joined up action could really look like? And 2, how incorporating air quality into climate action can make climate action cheaper, faster, and fairer. Overall, we found out that incorporating clean air as a priority within climate action will accelerate progress towards climate and health goals. There is significant potential for countries to deliver effective and inclusive air quality and climate solutions to create healthier, more resilient, and sustainable recovery pathways, and particularly after COVID-19. There are already some early adopters we can learn from who have started to integrate joined up action that promises early results and wide-ranging support. For example, In 2020, Mexico stepped up its commitment to tackling both climate change and air pollution with its new national strategy to reduce short-lived climate pollutants, which would reduce black carbon emissions by 53% in 2030, which would exceed their target of NCDs in the Paris Agreement. It would also reduce total greenhouse gas emissions by 9% by 2030, primarily through methane emission reductions. Similarly, Ghana has also recognized the strategic importance of acting on air pollution and climate together. In 2020, Ghana became the first country in the world to include air pollution in the form of black carbon in the National Greenhouse Gas Inventory that was submitted to the UNFCCC. And in 2018, Ghana published a National Action Plan to mitigate SLCPs, which identifies measures that both improve air quality and help to mitigate against climate change. What our study found was that it's cheaper to have an integrated approach to climate and air pollution because currently many climate decision-making processes do not account for savings on health and other co-benefits of cleaner air. Accounting for these co-benefits could unlock more CO2 abatement potential each year, and decarbonizing key sectors could therefore clean up the air and help to slow down warming. Secondly, we found out that joined-up action creates faster results on reducing both global warming and air pollution. Solutions that deliver climate and air quality co-benefits can save and improve millions of lives and grow economies within a typical political term. The faster results of air pollution benefits contribute significantly to the case for climate investments. And lastly, integrated action is also fairer because it will benefit the poor and the most vulnerable, who currently suffer the most. Poor and the most vulnerable are the most exposed to air pollution with little agency to mitigate or adapt to the health impacts. Similarly, the poor and the most vulnerable are also who face the brunt of climate change. These communities are at the front lines of both climate and air pollution. So the faster we put in solutions, the faster the vulnerable will have a chance to survive. So what do we do? If we end the use of fossil fuels, which contribute to both air pollution and climate change, we accelerate the gains on both fronts. People and communities get healthier, they breathe cleaner air, babies will not be born with stunted growth, children will not grow up with lifelong diseases as a result of toxic air. Ending the use of fossil fuels will significantly slow down global warming and bring us closer to the 1.5 degree target. However, there's just one caveat. Ending any new fossil fuel exploration and investment needs to happen now, not a year later, not 2 years later, and certainly not 10 years later. At the end, what we found was rolling out solutions to air pollution helps us to make communities healthier today, giving policymakers and political capital to act on bolder steps to decarbonize sectors that both pollute the air as well as cause global warming. We found out that politicians and political policymakers can rely on solutions to clean air to take much bolder steps for the future. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richa. And thank you for bringing in the aspect of climate justice and for communicating that it's cheaper to have integrated approach. So two final speakers, they will be sharing their passion for the benefits of nature-based solutions on both climate and health. So first off, we have Amanda Sturgeon. She is the head of regenerative design at Mott MacDonald. She's an award-winning architect and globally recognized leader in regenerative and biophilic design. So Amanda, you're going to have to tell us your fun fact, and hopefully you're a little prepared, but otherwise just make one up. Over to you, Amanda.
Hi, everybody, and good evening here from Sydney, Australia, where I'm speaking to you from Gadigal land. And I first want to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from land that was never ceded and has always been and will always be Aboriginal land. And I want to pay my respects to elders past, present, and the future. And I will feed into my presentation about regenerative design, about how the Aboriginal philosophy of taking care of country and it will take care of us is a relevant solution for us to address both climate and health at the same time. And maybe a fun fact, Claire, is that it's currently, 1:30 in the morning here in Sydney. So miraculously, I'm awake and somewhat eloquent, hopefully, in my presentation to you. I have to confess, I did take a little bit of an earlier nap so that I could be awake and coherent. But I'm going to talk about how I'm bringing a regenerative design approach to large transportation projects and city shaping projects. So you may not know that Sydney is in a vast phase of massive growth. It's looking to grow by several million people in the next decade or two. And to address that, thankfully, active and public transportation systems are being rapidly developed and built. But, you know, and those are being built both in sort of current greenfield areas that will be future parts of Sydney, as well as in the dense urban areas of Sydney and everything in between. So what I am doing currently is bringing a regenerative design approach to those projects. So what is it, firstly, and why is it important for bringing together both climate and health? So regenerative design seeks to harmonize the relationships between nature and people through the projects that we design. It uses a whole systems approach that focuses on regenerating natural systems to create positive outcomes for both people and nature at the same time. So typically our projects, right, they focus on people, especially when we look at, you know, public transportation systems. We're focused on how many people we can move. We're focused on the ticketing process being efficient. We're focusing on, you know, the system being safe. There's a lot of people-focused outcomes that we tend to focus on in our transportation projects. But, you know, what we miss in that approach is that, you know, we just focus on what's good for people. We ultimately, you know, have really sort of negative outcomes on all other species that we share this planet with. And we miss also that if we don't support and allow those natural systems and ecosystems and other species to thrive, that we're going to be dealing with a massive biodiversity collapse that will result in negative health impacts for every person on the planet. So with the collapse that we're facing, I am working on pivoting our focus to both positive outcomes for people, as we've heard so many brilliant ideas already in this session, but also that we pair those with positive impacts for all other species as well. In some of the projects that I'm working on, we're dealing with dense urban areas, and it's not uncommon for me to hear from colleagues and, you know, and on the client side that, well, the rivers have been polluted over, you know, the last couple of hundred years, the ecosystems have been destroyed, the ecology is really composed of like monospecies imported from the UK, and the ecology kind of, you know, is composed of, you know, rats and cockroaches predominantly. So, you know, what I commonly hear is there's nothing here that, you know, there's no natural system. But those are the kinds of areas that are prime regeneration. And for us to think about what keystone species we might be able to regenerate in our dense urban areas. So what if we were to be able to design for species that we want to regenerate through our transportation systems and allow those systems to unlock a whole regeneration of nature systems, river systems, and systems that can support all kinds of life as well as people. What the outcome we would achieve would be that we could create thriving river systems with native parklands that are teeming with insect and bird life, that lo and behold are also incredibly positive for our communities and our people, that help to contribute towards bringing clean air, clean water, as well as the intersection with nature in what is typically areas of cities that are really nature devoid. I call them nature deserts. And we could have both positive impacts for people and nature with really very, very little impact on the bottom line of a project, and look sort of beyond just the people outcomes to all other outcomes for all other species. So regenerative design is bringing this frame of mind to a project. It's saying we cannot have wellness and health of people without having wellness and health of all natural systems on which we rely. And it's been really sort of heartening to see when we bring this perspective to projects how many people that are engaged with projects at this scale resonate with those kinds of solutions and that kind of approach. I started with, an Indigenous acknowledgement, which is typical conduct at the beginning of meetings and presentations in Australia fairly recently. But I do want to come back to an Aboriginal saying. So Aboriginal people in Australia refer to nature or to the place that they're from as country, with a capital C. Quite a different definition to what we think of in the terms of country in the UK. And the saying that if we take care of country, it will take care of us is, really predominant, not just in Aboriginal communities, but in Indigenous countries around the world, who have recognized that we really can't have a healthy people without really respecting and taking care of the place and understanding that place and being an active part of regenerating and supporting its health and allowing it to thrive. So, I think if we look back at our Indigenous communities and look to what they can bring us in the present and into the future, we will see a lot of the solutions that we may need for the future for us to address both climate and health at the same time.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Thank you for reminding us of the importance of having respect for nature, which is a great introduction to our last speaker, Jad Daly, who is the CEO and president of American Forests. Jad leads its strategic direction and serves as its chief engagement officer as well in building diverse partnerships to advance American Forest's mission. You have a list of initiatives that you're part of, which I'm not going to go into because there are so many of them, so I will jump straight on to the fact that we know you're passionate about wood, and your favourite product is the mandolin, which you play every weekend in a bluegrass band.
That's exactly right. Wood has many magical qualities, and I think music is one of the most remarkable of them. Okay, so I'm the last speaker on one of the last panels of a very long 2 weeks, so I know it's a bit of a challenge. What I want to do, as opposed to cramming a bunch more information into everyone's heads at this point, is to try to make a couple of high-level connections between things that we've heard here today. And instead of slides, I'm actually going to give you permission to multitask. So close out of Twitter, because I know that's where you are, and actually just open a browser and go to treeequityscore.org. Treeequityscore, it's all kind of words mashed together, .org. And that's going to take you to an online tool that our organization created that will explain, it will connect a lot of the things that I want to say. And hopefully it's something that you can play with. Feel free to play with it while we're talking, and I hope that you'll play with it when you go home. Okay, so point number one. I really appreciate Irvan's point about mitigation and adaptation. I don't know about anybody else, but I think Cities Day should have been the first day. How is it that we're talking about the place where most people live on the last day? That feels wrong. And quite frankly, that's the way it usually goes down. That's not a coincidence, right? Cities have kind of been at the tail end of the climate action attention span here for a long time. And I think in part it is because, to your point, Irvan, we don't think about it the right way, and we balkanize it. And we think about, how do we protect cities from flooding or how do we protect cities from heat? And that's a resilience thing. When as the point I'm going to make is trees, for example, are something that actually is a potent form of mitigation and adaptation. And we can do both of those things together. And in fact, there are lots and lots of the things that we need to do in cities for adaptation and resilience that are much more of a mitigation solution than people realize. So I think that's one thing I want to leave everyone. We need to take on as an obligation in this community of folks who care about adaptation and resilience to always characterize the mitigation benefits. A number of years ago, I actually worked on helping to create a new greenhouse gas funded a program funded out of greenhouse gas proceeds in the state of California. And the way we were able to do that was called the program's called urban greening. And one of the ways that we were able to do that is that we did an inventory of what the greenhouse gas benefits were going to be from all of these different interventions, green infrastructure interventions, and found all sorts of efficiencies that people hadn't understood. And so when we were able to show that mitigation and adaptation connection together, we unlocked $80 million of carbon proceeds because they had to be tied to something that could produce a mitigation benefit. But I think, quite frankly, we also made the work much more interesting to a broader range of actors in the climate community. So here's your point number one. We are actually doing mitigation and adaptation, and let's own it, let's characterize it, and let's drive it forward. And that tool that I asked you to open up, treeequityscore.org, we quantify the climate mitigation benefits of more tree cover in cities. Okay, point number two. Why is it called Tree Equity Score? Very important. A map of trees, and we heard this throughout the other speakers. There's another through line between the things that you've heard today. All around the world, and acutely in the United States, a map of tree cover is a map of income, and it is a map of race and ethnicity in ways that transcend income. So that data that you're holding there in your hand, Tree Equity Score, it shows that on average in the United States, our lowest income communities have 41% less tree cover than our wealthiest communities. Our communities of color, regardless of income, due to structural and systemic racism, like the practice of redlining, have 33% less tree cover. Now, why does that matter? Tree cover is our number one, as we've heard all day, it's our number one defense against extreme heat, which is the greatest public health threat from climate change. It's also a potent defense against air pollution. Of course, heat and air pollution, I think everyone here knows, work together and are rising together as a result of climate change. So trees are our number one nature-based intervention for climate justice, for health equity and climate justice in this horrific context that we've created with climate change. And so the irony is the people who most need their homes to be cooled by trees, people who might not have air conditioning, don't have heat resilient homes, are the ones who are least likely to have that protection. The folks who have are more likely to have respiratory illness as a pre-existing condition are having that exacerbated because they have worse air quality in their community, in part because they don't have adequate tree cover. So what we did with Tree Equity Score is we didn't just generally announce that, and we didn't generalize it. We mapped every urban neighborhood in America. You can enter the name of a city for any city in America and take it all the way down to the neighborhood level and see neighborhood by neighborhood where the lack of trees is most acutely killing and sickening people. Because you have a lack of trees and it's being compounded by these risk factors that I've described. And so naming it and framing it like that has really changed the conversation and translating that data all the way down to local level. And here's I've got a million statistics I could share, but I'll just share one. In the United States right now, 12,000 people per year die from extreme heat. The projection is, this is a Duke University study, the projection is this century, 100,000 people per year, an almost tenfold increase, are going to die from extreme heat. And newsflash, we heard it from Sophie, we heard it from other people, that's not going to happen in leafy neighborhoods. That's going to happen in lower income communities and communities of color, again, where people have these underlying risk factors in their homes, in their health care, and where a little extra stress from extreme heat is going to be the tipping point of putting more people into illness and death. So that's why we say this is not an environmental campaign, this is a moral imperative. Not having trees in your neighborhood is like not having stoplights or sewers. It's basic infrastructure, not scenery. It's basic health and safety infrastructure for a just society. And by the way, it's also a climate solution at the same time. If we can't do that, shame on us. Absolutely shame on us. And so now I want to get to so I hopefully have sold you on you've heard a lot about trees today, but I want to put some numbers around it. I want to really make sure everybody understands just how common, a consistent issue this is around the world, the profound impacts that it has, and therefore we have the imperative to do something about it. Well, so Claire, I'm going to close by saying how we in the U.S. have been building a movement that, by the way, ties into not just being aided by the policies that we heard, kinds of policies we heard about earlier today, but actually has become a driver of creating them. And here's the first thing. Tree Equity Score has influenced policy. We have $500 million for tree equity that was part of the infrastructure bill that passed last weekend in the U.S. Congress. We have another $2.8 billion in the Build Back Better Act for tree equity. The U.S. government right now spends $30 million a year on this purpose. We're talking about a more than tenfold increase in the amount of money that the U.S. government would spend on this every year. Well, how did that happen? Well, one way it happened is that instead of talking about it one city at a time, we showed with True Equity Score, we showed that how universal it was. And we actually used data to show how the scale of impact that we were having, and to show that if you give us the money, we know what to do. We can have data-driven investment in our neighborhoods, in our communities, if you give us the money. And that has been a huge factor in getting this incredible federal investment. Second thing, and I should say, the last thing I'll say about that I think that's really important is that you're all sitting there using it right now, and I don't think anyone here has a degree in computer science, most likely. So we made a really important decision, not just to create the data and not just create the tool, but make it as easy to use as a smartphone, so that every citizen's group, every mayor, and every White House official, we're all seeing the same information and can all work with the same information together. And so it's not just the information, the way we've mobilized it, I think is really, really important, and I think we all need to be thinking about data and tools in that way. Okay, second, we have to build the right kind of partnerships. So earlier today I was virtually with the mayor of Phoenix, Arizona, Mayor Kate Gallego. Arizona, 5th largest city in the United States, committed this spring through the mayor and the city council to achieve tree equity in every neighborhood by 2030. Go search Phoenix and you'll see there's a lot of work to do. That's a big commitment that the city of Phoenix has made. Well, how do they make that commitment? Well, one part of it was we showed the need with the data. The second thing, though, was we spent a year before that commitment, spent actually a little more than a year, pulling together over 50 organizations from the most local community-based groups, frontline organizations, all the way to the mayor's office, all spending a year talking about what's this problem that we're dealing with, how would we fix it, what's everyone's role, so that it didn't just that idea didn't just land in the city as some top-down thing. It grew up from this Phoenix Urban Forest Roundtable. So we need to build the right kinds of partnerships so that by the time we're making policy, it's effortless for policymakers. They know we're all behind them, and that's going to be a really important piece of the puzzle. The third thing is, no one wants to invest in something if you're not quite sure if it's going to work. In urban forestry, a lot of folks have raised questions. Do we know how to plant the right trees in the right places? Will we have unintended consequences if we plant trees? Will they all fall on someone's house? And so we invested with the U.S. Forest Service in the U.S., our organization, and the U.S. Forest Service created a new Urban Forest and Health Action Guide, where we answered all those very specific questions about what tree species to plant, how to plant them, where, taking into account climate resilience and adaptation, climate mitigation, so we can maximize that climate mitigation benefit, and all the variables of how trees can benefit health. So we're really being fine scale and precise in getting all the air quality benefits, heat risk reduction benefits, and other health benefits that trees can provide. So we really showed that we know what we're doing here. We're going to have the right technique and rigor to how we do it. And that has all led to, again, the kinds of ultimately big policy solutions, big investments that we're getting. And so now, we didn't just get all dressed up with nowhere to go, but we actually have city by city around America, folks who are ready to do this work at scale. And lastly, matched by incredible state, local, and private investment. I want to just, my last plug is, if you want to see what that looks like, check out us.1t.org. We formed a coalition in the U.S. of all the different state and local governments, companies, NGOs, and civil society organizations, youth and faith organizations, all of whom are interested in this issue. And we said, okay, everybody say what you're willing to do to help us move it forward, so that, again, when we're doing things like trying to get massive new federal funding, we can show that everyone's in. And what you'll see there, if you go to us.1t.org, is an incredible wave of pledges from everyone from literally the Girl Scouts of the USA to state and local governments that have gone all in, and they put themselves down for what they're going to do to try to achieve tree equity in cities and also use forests as a climate solution outside of cities. So I think, Claire, if we take that kind of an approach, we're structured, we're data-driven, we're holistic, we're rigorous in everything that we're doing, and ultimately make it into an us thing where there's a role for everyone, we can do huge things, and we can, among other things, deliver tree equity.
Brilliant, thank you. And I could see our time to look at the results of the Mentimeter poll reducing, but you are so compelling, so definitely needed for you to keep telling us your messages, including the fact that quantification is the thing that then unlocks the funding, because you were able to quantify these benefits across different angles. So I think what we'll do, I wanted to sort of finish on the message of let's keep talking, but I am fascinated to know what's come out of the polls. So if we can bring those up, and we'll just flick through them. Probably not time for comments on them, except some thoughts that I might have. So choose 3 interventions you think will most benefit both climate resilience and societal health. So the strong 3 are improving air quality, promoting active lifestyles, and promoting sustainable food production and nutrition. For me, that's not a great surprise, except perhaps the low one on the right, the protection against flooding. So that is quite interesting. Sorry? Okay, let's go on to the next one. I'm quite interested to know what's coming out of the next one. The top 3 barriers to having a more integrated approach to climate change and health. So leadership and governance, I guess that's not a surprise, but hopefully Sophie and a few of the other speakers have injected some enthusiasm there. Disciplinary silos, again, very much not a surprise, and something that possibly we can do something about. Complexity and awareness, those are things, again, that I'm not surprised. Okay, what have we next? The next question is more about trying to filter whether, we're neck and neck on that, whether either policy driven, so the first 5 speakers, or topic driven, our second set, are more likely to be effective. And obviously it's a combination of both, but I was interested to know whether there would be a front runner. So I am most interested to know what comes up on the final slide, which is a word cloud. Interesting. So one word to describe the relationship between health and climate resilience: interconnected. That's good. That does show that we need to increase or break down the barriers between departmental silos. Symbiotic, intertwined, critical and crucial. Which I think all of which are very relevant. So just on our final slide, the reason we put this together was to be sharing messages. So let's keep talking. You can find our speakers, most of them on LinkedIn. I was really glad to find that you'd made a connection with Sophie Irvin, so hopefully you can keep that going. And the information, you can find more information under the Resilience Hub Health and Wellbeing topic, with some links to some reports and things that our speakers have talked about, because that's what this is. This is about collaboration, sharing messages across different sides of the world, and then moving forwards together. So thank you everybody for listening. Thank you to everyone participating online for the work that you did on the polls. So thank you very much. And to our speakers online and Jad here in the room. Thank you.